New overnight, President Trump's 10% tariff on China took effect, and China announced retaliatory measures. Eunice Yoon joins us now from Beijing to detail those. Hello, Eunice.
Hey, guys. Well, China raised the stakes. It announced a raft of countermeasures, 10 to 15% tariffs on energy imports, farm gear and trucks, export curbs on tungsten and other rare metals, an antitrust probe on Google, and then blacklisting PVH, which is the owner of the Tommy Hilfiger brand and Calvin Klein brand, as well as genetics company Illumina. Now, the impact of each measure varies. It is overall, though, relatively modest. For example, the U.S. accounts for 5.4% of China's LNG purchases. The Google search engine is blocked here. U.S. companies also ship a very limited number of farm equipment as well as big engine sedans to China. Even so, this move today is really seen as a way for China to gain leverage on President Trump if there is indeed some sort of larger trade deal.
And Eunice, that clearly seems to be the takeaway that, as you say, these are relatively, measured and selective measures that China has put on here. What do we think the terms of any negotiation might be? Obviously, the sort of cover for the, proposed Mexico and Canada tariffs were mostly about fentanyl at the border. Is that going to be, where things come together here? Is there something more that we're going to have to be mindful of?
Well, I think that it looks as though the discussions with the Mexican president as well as the Canada's Justin Trudeau were mainly about fentanyl. And so from China's perspective, they've already said again today that fentanyl is the U.S.'s problem. And I think what you're seeing is that unlike Canada and Mexico, China does not feel that it is in a position, and the CCP as well as President Xi Jinping is not in a position to really look as though they are caving in to the West. They are loath to that. They want to make sure that President Xi looks as though he is always in control in any discussion with President Trump. So a lot of these measures that we're seeing now, I would think would appear to be a way for China to leverage against President Trump in any discussion for a larger economic bargain.
Eunice, why these companies that are kind of being singled out? It doesn't make sense, at least from our perspective. Is there anything you can see for making rhyme or reason of why those companies were selected?
I think that it's probably because they don't actually have that much business here. They're not, it's not super meaningful. I mean, for Google, for example, like I said, there is no search engine here for Google. They have 1% of global sales in China, so there is some business here. But for a PVH, we've already seen that investigation announced. Illumina is a new one, but they have a relatively small business here, though they have been growing. So we could see that they are selecting companies that have some exposure here, but wouldn't necessarily rock the boat, but still would provide a way for China to be able to say, well, I'll allow some, more sales of one particular item or another if you, give in on something else that preferably that China would want to see from the United States, such as a lifting of export controls or to the like.
Eunice, I know this is a hard question to answer, but can you tell me, after what just happened with Canada and Mexico, does President Trump look stronger, weaker, or about the same to the leaders in China? Or is it a very different situation in that this is China and the politics are just so different domestically here in the United States?
Well, I think it's probably about the same. My guess is that from what we saw here and the reaction generally here to the 10% tariff, it was really one of relief for the most part from manufacturers who we spoke to, but also potentially from the way the government was reacting, because this looks as though it's a friendlier White House to the Chinese. That you saw that President Xi and President Trump had a conversation, that the Chinese were invited to the inauguration, so the VP was meeting with J.D. Vance, so overall it's been kind of friendly. And then when it was 10%, it was seen as, well, wow, that's pretty good. It wasn't the 60% that was promised on the campaign trail. And so I don't necessarily think that that anything really changed from this particular announcement.